So yes, we'll start this off with, this is an offering from B.B. Govinda Maharaj to Brahmananda Prabhu. I offer my respectful obeisances to Brahmananda Prabhu, who is very dear to Srila Prabhupada, having taken shelter of his lotus feet. I offer my respectful obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are like desire trees who can fulfill the desires of everyone and are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Please forgive me for not attending today's ceremony. We are having problems with a few hardheads in our Bagicha who want to bend the rules regarding the safety and security of our colony members. It is best that I remain at home and give a proper example. By the time I came to ISKCON, June 1971, Brahmananda Prabhu was already a cult icon. He was one of Srila Prabhupada's first disciples, a pioneer preacher, sannyasi, bigger-than-life personality, and dedicated servant of His divine grace. I unfortunately never had quality association with Brahmananda Prabhu. Thus it is hard to share some special remembrances of his association. But there is one thing that I have always observed. Whenever Brahmananda spoke about Srila Prabhupada, he would weep and show such emotion. So I understood that he loved Srila Prabhupada. And without a doubt, Srila Prabhupada loved him. He was a real Prabhupada man. May we all remember his lifelong dedication to his beloved Master Srila Prabhupada, and may we all be blessed by that remembrance. Brahmananda Prabhu ki jai. Hare Krishna. I came also around the same time, April 1971. New Vrindavan area. Actually, I got to know Brahmananda Prabhu by being Prabhupada's servant, and I did get a lot of time to be around Brahmananda. We had a very good relationship, an interesting relationship. One time he said to someone, "What can you do?" Sruta Kirti, he's Prabhupada's servant. Sometimes Prabhupada would even, like brothers, treated us, the two of us, like brothers, and kind of pitted us against one another, I think, just to enhance that relationship we had. And once in Mayapur, he was Prabhupada's secretary, and it was Brahmananda Prabhu in New Vrindavan. I had been with Prabhupada from October 1972, September 72, until the end of 73. And then I left, got married, was gone for 8 months. I was back in New Vrindavan and aimlessly staying in New Vrindavan. And Brahmananda at that time was his secretary. And the day before Prabhupada left New Vrindavan, Brahmananda came up to me and said, "Do you want to be Prabhupada's servant again?" And after thinking very briefly about my situation, I said yes. So it was at that time, Janmashtami 74, then I got to spend months with Brahmananda Prabhu. And it was in Mayapur. They had just, Lotus building was almost finished. Prabhupada had his 2 rooms. And right in front of Prabhupada's 2 rooms, the first room was the servants' quarters, Prabhupada's entourage. So Brahmananda and I, we stayed there together. Of course, he was sannyasi. And I traveled with very little bit. There was Prabhupada's belongings, and then there was mine. And there were times in travel, my belongings were in Prabhupada's suitcase. Literally 1 suitcase for the 2 of us. And the others, of course, all did whatever they did. So as we arrived in Mayapur in the Lotus building, which Prabhupada just loved that building so much, the breezes would come through one side of the room to the other, how the windows were on both sides. In Mayapur at that time, there were no other buildings around, so it was very wonderful. And Prabhupada would go along back and forth in the veranda, always inspecting. Prabhupada always saw everything. So he's observed everything. So he was walking back and forth across the veranda, and then he came to our room. Brahmananda and I were staying, gotten all set up. You know, you travel, everywhere you go, you got to set up, open your suitcase, get everything. So Prabhupada got his hand in his bead bag, and he looks in the room, and it's just Brahmananda and I in the room. And he looks, Brahmananda is sitting in his bed, with pole bed, got the mosquito net around the bed, fans twirling above him. And then he looks, and I'm sitting in the corner on a straw mat, no fan, no nothing, just sitting there in the corner. Prabhupada looks back and forth. He looks at Brahmananda. He says, actually, Shrutakirti is detached. And then he left the room. So that was the beginning of Brahmananda. My relationship was Prabhupada poking at him. Shrutakirti's detached. He said, and Brahmananda just looked at me, you know. We were like little fleas around Brahmananda. And it was there in Mayapur. Again, we had a very nice relationship. Here in Vrindavan, we were together 1974, August, September of 74, when this temple was supposed to be opened. Of course, that was fake news, we would say now, right? That was fake news, you know. It wasn't anywhere near opening. People had traveled here to see the opening.
Still not open.
Still not open. Now again, we're closed. While we're on the subject, all these residents here in Vrindavan, we have no other shelter but Krishna and Balaram. We come here, live in Vrindavan, right? Nothing. I have no home anywhere. And then these two lords, they have the nerve to close the temple on us for 3 months. This is Krishna's business. Even someone like me, I wanted to come to the temple. He got me to that point, wanting to come to this temple. That's Krishna's business, how to increase that desire. Anyway, it's working. And sooner or later, we're all going to want just Krishna. He's the only one that can solve, as Panchagoda said months ago, how the Corona Sura. There's no problem with Corona Sura. Anyway, back to Brahmananda. We were here at that time in 74. Prabhupada got very, very ill. I've told this story many times. Prabhupada was on the veranda in his garden sleeping one night. And I would sleep under Prabhupada's bed because the mosquito net came down from the post bed down to the ground. So Prabhupada was under the mosquito net in his bed, and I was under his bed under the same mosquito net because it was very hot, September. And one evening around 1 o'clock in the morning, he tried to go to the bathroom by himself. So he got out of bed and he collapsed right on the ground next to me where I was resting. So of course I got him and sat him in the bed, said, Prabhupada, what happened? And he said, oh, I needed to pass. He said, and I didn't want to disturb you. Imagine. He didn't want to disturb me, who's lying under his bed as his servant. He said, but I see I have no strength. I chastised him. It was the one time I chastised Prabhupada. I said, you have to tell me. And I brought him to the bathroom and back. I bring it up because that was 1974. It was almost 30 years later. My book came out. What is the difficulty? And we were here in Vrindavan again 30 years later. Brahmananda was here, living here, of course, at that time. And he had read through my book. And he saw that one spot. And he said, where was I when that happened? Everything, when he saw that Prabhupada had fallen down, he said, where was I? He says, I should have been there. And then he said the nicest thing to me. He said, I didn't know you were a poet. because of the writing. But out of everything he read, that one thing, it made him feel terrible, like it made me feel terrible. Wasn't there to help Prabhupada. That was Brahmananda. That was all he ever thought about was Prabhupada. Just like our Srila Prabhupada would say, what can I say about my Guru Maharaj? He was a Vaikuntha man. Brahmananda, he's the epitome, he was a Prabhupada man. That's all he knew was Prabhupada. Watching him as Prabhupada's secretary, he was Prabhupada's man in every way. He was Prabhupada's bouncer. When he was with Prabhupada, there were times people would be in Prabhupada's room. One of his disciples here in India came to see Prabhupada, ex-servant, sannyasi. He left, grew his hair, his beard, came to see Prabhupada. I think he was definitely on some drugs. And Prabhupada was trying to talk with his disciple. And he starts doing mudras in front of Prabhupada, doing all these things. I didn't know what he was doing. And at that point, Prabhupada he would get this shudder. Prabhupada, when you saw Prabhupada's real anger, there was nothing compared to it, and you didn't want to be around. He just shook. And I was sitting in the room, and he just looked at me. He said, call Brahmananda. That was it. So I went and got Brahmananda. He just remove him. Brahmananda, he could remove anyone, and he doesn't. He just picked them up and out of the room. That was it. I could go on, but I won't. Maybe there'll be something later in the day. There's a funny story I could tell about how I saved Brahmananda's life from drowning. I've told it before here, but it's I think we'll let others speak at this time. If we do something later, could hear it. No, I think it's we'll go on. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Brahmananda Prabhu ki jai.
You'll be happy to hear that this will be the shortest offering. Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastar Bhaleshmari Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravana Visharane Nivase Shunivari Bashadade Shitarane. Short because like Govinda Maharaj, who I joined the movement with in Buffalo, I also had very little quality association with Brahmananda Prabhu, but what I had was just so sweet in different parts of the world. And it was kind of, because we're both from the New York City area, it was kind of like a New York, I can't explain it, but whenever he would see me, he would just go, you, you know, it was just like, you know, like, it's you know, and it was just a sweetness. And then he had such, as large as he was, he had that size, outsized personality. The way when he would give an offering about Srila Prabhupada, he would break down at crying. And so his heart was as big, and it was just very, very moving. And I was thinking that even though Srila Prabhupada was holding him up in every way, spiritually, Prabhupada could lean on him to protect him. And I can't even imagine what that relationship is now, him now being again with Srila Prabhupada. So I just wanted to offer my eternal obeisances to Brahmananda Prabhu, and for his encouragement. He encouraged me in so many ways. Even when I would give an offering, he would just go, you know, like, he just gave encouragement, and it was a very sweet relationship. And he's, the depth of his love for Srila Prabhupada was so evident to us who even had a little bit of association with him. Brahmananda Prabhu ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Hare Krishna.
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutle Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Tinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunnivari Paschatya Desha Tharine. Brahmananda was one of the earliest disciples of Srila Prabhupada. He came to 26 2nd Avenue in August of 1966. That means just a few months, 2 or 3 months after the 26 2nd Avenue Matchless Gift was established. He was recommended to come by a friend who he lived with at NYU, New York University, where he was studying. He had just finished his last subject that he had to complete his graduation, and it was on Bhagavad-Gita. And he did a wonderful thesis, and because in 1964 his father arranged that he work on a ship, so he got the opportunity to visit India at that time, and he fell in love with India then. And ever since then he became what's called an Indophile. He loved India and he loved everything about India. So he would, whatever he saw Indian, he would buy that. And everything about him, it became Indian. And he was particularly interested in Bhagavad-Gita, and he was looking for a guru. At that time in America, the early 60s, Prabhupada hadn't arrived yet, so he found the Ramakrishna Mission, and they were uptown Swami. They wore suits and ties and sat in chairs, and a lot of old ladies were there. And even then, he wanted to become the student of that guru because he was so interested in learning Bhagavad-Gita. So finally, when his friend Michael Green told him about this place at 26 2nd Avenue, it was just 10 blocks from his house, he walked there one hot day in August and felt completely at home as soon as he got there. And he started spending as much time as possible there with the devotees and with Srila Prabhupada. And he finally asked the devotees if he could speak to Prabhupada personally. And he explained to Prabhupada, I don't know who I am, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And Prabhupada immediately told him, you're a part and parcel of Krishna, and then he quoted Mamai Vangsa Jivaloke Jiva, and he just explained to Brahmananda, your duty is to serve Krishna, you're his part and parcel. And when Brahmananda heard that, it's like the very thing he had been searching for his whole life, Prabhupada just told him in 2 minutes. So then he wanted to become Prabhupada's student. And they were just going to have the first initiations, Janmashtami 1966. He wasn't quite ready, but 2 weeks later, on Radhastami, Prabhupada made 3 Anandas. He made Brahmananda, Achyutananda, and Kirtanananda. And then he also Satsvarup Maharaj, Satsvarup. So those 4 were initiated on Radhastami. And Janmashtami, it was Hayagriva, Umapadi, Mukunda, and Rairam. So Brahmananda, he wanted to go to India, but Umapadi said to him, well, why do you have to go to India? India's come to you. Prabhupada's here, so just learn from him. So he was working at that time. Prabhupada encouraged him. Prabhupada told him that Krishna spoke the Bhagavad-Gita because Arjuna wanted to stop working. So Krishna had to convince him to continue working. So you should also continue your work because we need finances to push on this movement. So Prabhupada encouraged Brahmananda. He was a teacher at that time, and he encouraged him. And finally one day, because after Prabhupada's lectures, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, they used to pass around a basket. People would throw in a few coins, a few dollars, and Brahmananda threw in a $100 bill. So when Prabhupada would count the money right in front of everybody. And when he saw that $100 bill, he looked at Brahmananda and smiled. So he knew that Brahmananda had given it. And also, the devotees at 26 2nd Avenue, they would all take prasadam together, but nobody would want to wash the pots. But because Brahmananda had worked on the ship, and he washed the pots on the ship, he was fine with washing pots. So he went in the kitchen, cleaned up the kitchen, washed all the pots, and then Prabhupada came in the kitchen. He said, "Who has cleaned so nicely?" "Oh, Bruce." "Very nice." So Prabhupada was very happy with him. He was an excellent pot washer. So gradually, Prabhupada started depending on Brahmananda more and more to do services. And he assigned him as the first temple president of Matchless Gifts, 26 2nd Avenue. Prabhupada didn't consider that to be a temple. It was just a preaching center because there were no deities there. Finally, Brahmananda, as the temple president, just up the street at 61 2nd Avenue, he found a very nice place, and he moved the devotees there. He moved the whole temple there. And there they got Radha Krishna deities. So then that was the first temple in New York. And Brahmananda, there was no devotee in the entire movement. See, now these things are removed from the books. But before, whenever Prabhupada wrote a book, he would write acknowledgments. And he would always put the devotees' names who helped him the most. And every single book, Brahmananda's name was there. Because he helped, Prabhupada even sent him to Japan to print books. He was Prabhupada's representative for the book printing. He got the first Bhagavad-Gita printed with Macmillan just by chance. It was a beautiful story. If anyone wants to read it, it's in Prabhupada's house. And then the album, the record album, he was so instrumental in assisting Prabhupada. That's just the beginning. He was so instrumental through the entire 11 years that Prabhupada was present, and after that as well. He never left Prabhupada's lotus feet, never. Then one day Prabhupada was giving a lecture in 26 2nd Avenue, and Prabhupada, I'm sorry, just take a minute. Prabhupada was speaking from the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, and he had come to the 30th verse. Apichet suduracharo bhajate mam ananyabhak sadur eva samanthavya samyak vyavasito hi saha. So Prabhupada was saying that even if our Brahmananda was walking down the street and smoking a cigarette, still we would consider him a sadhu. So this is because most of the devotees here, they didn't know Brahmananda as a powerful, all-effulgent sannyasi as we knew him. There was nobody more powerful than Brahmananda. Anywhere he went, he was able to overtake the entire place with his preaching, with his kirtan, with his going on Sankirtan. Actually, when Prabhupada started Sankirtan, the first time Brahmananda and the devotees went to Tompkins Square Park, and they were heckled, and obscenous, bad words were thrown at them, and it wasn't a very nice experience. And then the second time Prabhupada went out, this is Prabhupada going out with the devotees. Prabhupada was dressed like a sannyasi, and then he had Kirtanananda dress up in yellow robes, and Brahmananda, of course, was there. He was feeling a little uncomfortable because they only danced in the temple. And then the boys on the road, the bad boys, they were saying, "Hey, Buddha, you forgot to change your pajamas." So it didn't seem like it was going to be very nice, but it was a Sunday. And Sunday, everybody's free in America. So a lot of people were at the park. Prabhupada sat down, and the boys all sat down with him. Prabhupada started singing, and just instantaneously, without any Prabhupada asking him or nothing, Brahmananda stood up and started dancing. And after he stood up, then Achyutananda started dancing. You can see in the videos the two of them dancing around. They would dance around in circles in those days, going around a tree or whatever. So Brahmananda was our first dancer, and as Dinabandhu said, very auspicious. It was the appearance day, I think, of Vakreshwar Pandit. Appearance day, yes. So Brahmananda being the first dancer in ISKCON, it's a very, not coincidental that he left the word on this day. So in 1966, and then setting up the new temple, and the person who owned that spot, it used to be an old tuxedo shop that's fine dress for men. So his brother by that time had joined. In fact, his brother, Brahmananda, got initiated in September. Gargamuni got initiated in October. So he was right there with him the whole time. So Gargamuni, he set up the ground floor as a spiritual sky shop. He was a businessman, 100%, Gargamuni, from the very beginning. He knew how to make money for Prabhupada, and he was so good at it. He bought the first dictaphone for Prabhupada. Anything those two brothers could do for Prabhupada. And in fact, when Brahmananda was getting initiated, he got inspired to invite his mother to come for the initiation ceremony. And Prabhupada, before the initiation started, Prabhupada very politely said to his mother, "Would you like to give a donation?" And she got angry. And she said, "I've given you my 2 sons. What more do you want?" And then there's so many stories. He once gave Prabhupada a very big donation, like over 1,000 rupees. I forget, $1,700 or something. Not rupees, dollars. It was so much money. But he wanted Prabhupada's 3 volumes of the Bhagavatam. So after Prabhupada received the money, Brahmananda asked if he could have the 3 Bhagavatams, and Prabhupada told him how much they cost, and he had to pay for them. So, because the East Coast, he was in charge. We would all go up for Mahasankirtan to New York, and Brahmananda was always in charge there. And then finally, 1970, Prabhupada decided to make 4 sannyasis. At that time, he only had 1 sannyasi, that was Kirtananda. So it was Brahmananda, and Gargamuni, he said, he decided what's good for the goose is good for the gander. A gander is the female, you know, the 2 of them go together. So if Brahmananda is taking sannyas, well, he also has to take sannyas. So he asked Prabhupada, well, my brother's taking sannyas, you know, also let me take sannyas. So it was Brahmananda, Gargamuni, Vishnu Jan, and Subal. So they were honored with sannyas by Srila Prabhupada in July of 1970. And they were sent out, preach. So they started traveling, and they came to the East Coast, and they came to Philadelphia, where I met Brahmananda, and the 4 of them were sitting in a room together always, discussing things. And at that time, it was going to be Janmashtami, 1970. I should stop now, it's getting late, huh? Yeah, so this was where the 4 of them had hatched a philosophy that Prabhupada was God. And they took that philosophy, we all drove to New Vrindavan together, and they expounded on that philosophy at the Janmashtami festival. Were you? No, you weren't there yet. And we all being new devotees, and they being the only sannyasis in the movement, it just turned everybody upside down. And the devotees just started running out of New Vrindavan into the forest. They said Prabhupada didn't come because we all offended him, and they had such a philosophy, nobody could understand it. And then finally, the other devotees defeated them. It was a big battle there in New Vrindavan. And when Prabhupada heard about it, he banned them all. He kicked them all out of ISKCON as a punishment. And they had to wander with nothing until they finally corrected their mentality. And then one by one, they all came back and begged forgiveness from Srila Prabhupada for misunderstanding the philosophy. Prabhupada, of course, accepted them and then sent them out on special missions. But Prabhupada gave Brahmananda and Gargamuni the most difficult mission. He sent them to Pakistan. Tough love. Sent them to Pakistan. East Pakistan, Gargamuni, and West Pakistan, Brahmananda. And they were supposed to make devotees there, and it was just the time of the Pakistan and Indian War. So Prabhupada was in India at the time, and he heard about the war, and he heard that 2 Americans were killed, and Prabhupada was so worried about them. So somehow or other, they made it back to India, and when Prabhupada saw Brahmananda, he just embraced him and felt his body, and there were tears, and this is the kind of love that Prabhupada and Brahmananda had. And it just went on and on like that. Then Prabhupada sent him to Africa. He gave him the most difficult jobs, and he was always calling him to be his secretary, because he was the best secretary. Really, he was. The very best. He even wanted Brahmananda to be the secretary at the end, but Brahmananda was so caught up in Africa. He said, if I leave now, everything's going to fall apart. So he couldn't come, so Tamal Krishna Maharaj was appointed the secretary. There was such a love and interdependence between Prabhupada and Brahmananda. Finally, when Brahmananda came, he fell sick as soon as he got here. Prabhupada was on his deathbed, and after like 3 or 5 days, finally Brahmananda came down to see Prabhupada, and he's sitting in the room. Prabhupada says, Brahmananda? Immediately Brahmananda comes to his bedside, and Prabhupada says to him, you were ill? And Brahmananda just broke out crying. Prabhupada's on his deathbed. He can't move, and he's asking me if I'm sick. And this is the love that they had, the two of them. So all my most humble obeisances to Brahmananda. I love him and I miss him. Hare Krishna.
Brahmananda ki jai. So we can see how fortunate we are to be guided by Srila Prabhupada. So many philosophies in the world, many conclusions, philosophers. People are bewildered. Arguments go on forever. Brahmananda Prabhu was attracted from the very beginning, understanding the Indian philosophy to some degree. But you can see that Srila Prabhupada gave clarity and life. He gave clarity and life to Brahmananda. I met him many times in Florida, also when we were here in Vrindavan, assisting him. Brahmananda was very enthusiastic to speak about Prabhupada, to glorify Prabhupada, because Srila Prabhupada was the real father, giving this Vedic conclusion in such a beautiful way. It's not by chance that devotees come to Srila Prabhupada. Brahmanda Brahmite Konya Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. That one who's very fortunate, he gets the mercy of Krishna and Guru. And it's not by one's scholarship or great studies or austerities. It's by that love and devotion and dedication. And Brahmananda Prabhu had such love and devotion and dedication that the Guru is giving blessings. By Krishna, the Guru is representing Krishna, and by Krishna's blessings we can actually awaken some feelings of love, and only by bhakti, by love, can we go back to Krishna. So whenever I would see Brahmananda, I'd take the opportunity to give him massage. Although he was huge, he was rock solid. I'd put all my energy into, and he could take it. And I just felt that if I could render a little service to the Vaishnavas, this would please Prabhupada, this would please Krishna. So we should appreciate the family that we're all in, this ISKCON family. The early devotees, obviously we're remembering their sacrifice, their commitment, their love for Srila Prabhupada, and their dedication. So many years of dedication and steadfastness. So we should all be very dedicated to Prabhupada's mission. We should glorify the Vaishnavas, just like the 6 Goswamis, those, we take the dust of their feet who are worshiping other Vaishnavas. So today we're remembering Brahmananda Prabhu, Brikeshwar Pandit, the associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It is all Srila Prabhupada's blessings for all of us. We should have gratitude, appreciation, as Brahmananda Prabhu had gratitude and appreciation. And whenever he would speak about Srila Prabhupada, he would express his emotions, not artificially, but he would cry out of separation and feelings of appreciation for Srila Prabhupada. So we're missing Brahmananda today, and remembering him, his smile, and his dedication. Shri Brahmananda Prabhu ki, Hare Krishna.
So, like many others have expressed, I was always a West Coaster, so I'd never had so much association with Brahmananda Prabhu except here in Vrindavan. And like everyone else, those memories are very stored in our hearts, how the incredible love that Brahmananda had for Srila Prabhupada. As everyone has expressed, he would always tear up when he would speak about Prabhupada's wonderful pastimes. So that's my association with him. And as Devi Shakti mentioned, Prabhupada sent him to some of the most heavy places. One was to Africa, but imagine back in those days going to Pakistan. It's a little bit more liberal now, but imagine those days. And we heard how Prabhupada was so pleased with him. We can't imagine being embraced by a spiritual master. It's just amazing. But one thing that nobody knows about, or very few people know about that trip to Pakistan, was that there was a young doctor there who happened to come in contact with Brahmananda. And he heard Brahmananda preaching. And he was thinking, I'm a Brahmin, and this boy from foreign country is doing the work that I'm supposed to be doing. He became so inspired, he began to study Prabhupada's books, and that person is none other than our dear Sarvabhauma Prabhu, who's now preaching all over India, all over the world. I mean, everywhere I go, he was on TV, so everywhere I go with him, the train station, you're the guy from Atma program, you're the guy from Atma program. So that Prabhupada sending him there was so instrumental. He inspired this young Brahmin boy. He was going to be a doctor. He gave up his idea of becoming a doctor because doctor means he has no time for preaching. So he became teacher of the doctor. Then he knows I have this much time in the class, this much for grading papers, and the rest of time for, preaching. So this was one of the wonderful things that nobody knows, or not few people know about Brahmananda going to Pakistan. And like everyone said, he was huge. I was always frightened by him, but he was always very, very kind to me. So I don't have much memories, or we're running out of time. There's a lot of other people to speak, so I'd like to read Mahadevi's offering. It looks long, but it's just formatted funny, so. But she was serving him at the last, so her offering is very interesting. I will always be grateful to you, Brahmananda Prabhu, for sharing your memories and unlimited glories of Srila Prabhupada with us all, especially during the last five years of your life in Vrindavan. I never left your side or your feet on that last day in your body, June 7, 2015, from the early morning when Gargamuni Prabhu called me right up till 3:20 p.m. in the afternoon when you departed from your body in this world in your preaching chair. It is a day etched in my memory forever. You had fallen and fainted in the early morning of your departure when Gargamuni called me, freaked out about 4 a.m. I rushed over to find you on the floor with blood all around and a big gash on your head. While cleaning up the blood and wound on your head, I kept reassuring you that Prabhupada is with us. I called Saranga and Dharmatma an hour later, and with a few workers we lifted your body with great difficulty into your preaching chair. Your body was about 350 pounds at that time. You eventually left that body some 12 hours later in your preaching chair. It is described that the great saints leave their bodies in the place where they preach. How amazing that you left us on the auspicious appearance day of Sri Vakeshwar Pandit, one of Lord Chaitanya's intimate dancers. Especially significant, you departed on this day as you were Prabhupada's first dancer at Tompkins Square Park. A famous photo from 1967 shows you dancing the Swami step, while Prabhupada was chanting Hare Krishna and playing his tam-tam. Prabhupada was so happy when that photo was printed in the local New York newspaper. Your last day was an ongoing challenge, hearing you gasping for air, barely able to speak, but making it very clear. Don't let them take me out of Vrindavan. Don't let them take me out of Vrindavan. You told me twice, ironically, had told me 2 weeks before. It was Prabhupada's arrangement that when some devotee had called an ambulance to take you to Delhi, to a Delhi hospital, the little tiny ambulance with two skinny attendants wasn't even fit for one of your legs. Back in 1967, Prabhupada ordered you and Gargamuni to get him out of the Jewish Beth Israel Hospital in New York. Brahmananda Prabhu, you were there with the getaway car and rescued Prabhupada from the hospital. In the last 5 years of your life, it was a divine privilege to serve you as your caregiver, arranging for preaching programs in your room and Balaram Hall, and your all-rounder errand girl, as well as your friend and grateful God-sister. I felt like I was serving you as your mother too, like making sure you took your vitamins and making sure Govindadasi's special cake that you loved, that making you share Govindadasi's special cake that you loved. Otherwise, you would eat the whole cake by yourself. You told us that Prabhupada predicted there will be big preaching in hospitals because we're all going to get old. When we were all in our 20s, when Prabhupada said that, at that time, 30 was old. Then, Brahmananda, you sang a line from the Beatles, "When I'm 64. We thought 64 was ancient," you said, and here we are now. Prabhupada said, don't think this will happen to you. Old age, disease, and then death. We see we see this all the time in Vrindavan. To hear about Prabhupada from you was like associating with Prabhupada personally. Every time we heard you speak, every time in your presence, you had the iconic mood about you that imbibed the presence of Prabhupada. There are more than 200 letters between Prabhupada and you, and more than 200 photos of Prabhupada and you. We are trying to publish a book with all the nectar. Your life was about pleasing Prabhupada. You told us you didn't hesitate when Prabhupada asked you to do something. Like when Prabhupada asked you, all his big men, to go to Africa, and everyone was too terrified. Back in the early 70s, Africa was a wild jungle with scary-looking people. Then Prabhupada turned to you, Brahmananda, you will go? And you said immediately, yes, I will go to Africa, Srila Prabhupada. So many times, Prabhupada's Gita manuscript had been rejected in America. Prabhupada sent you to the Macmillan office and told you what to say. You did exactly what Prabhupada told you to do, and the rest is history. Prabhupada used you in numerous ways because he trusted you as his dear son. My dear devotees, you must be knowing that Brahmananda and Gargamuni Prabhus were going to inherit $7 million from their wealthy father. But the father said, you must choose the Swami or me. They chose Swamiji and were instantly disowned by their father. Brahmananda, you went back to tell Prabhupada, we wanted to give you all that money. With tears in your eyes, you described this story, how Prabhupada held you both in his divine arms, telling you, that's okay, I will be your father. From their 32-room mansion, they slept on the floor to serve you. You can feel the intimacy in the photos between Prabhupada and Brahmananda. I could go on and on with stories about you, Brahmananda Prabhu, but I'll end with one humorous encounter with you. Your visa was going to expire a few months before you left us, and there was no way you could get on a plane to go to America for a new visa. So I started the procedure of acquiring a medical visa. I had done before, so I followed the required steps, which included going to the embassy with your medical file, getting USMB official stamp, then taking those documents to the CMO in Mathura. By Krishna's arrangement, all three chief medical officers were meeting together that day. I showed them the photos I had taken of Brahmananda along with his thick medical file, embassy approval, appealing for medical visa. I told them they should come and see Brahmananda, prove that he was medically unfit to travel. To my surprise, they all agreed. Chalo, let's go. So they took their car and I all the way in an auto rickshaw. On the way I called you and told you, lie down on your bed with your oxygen mask on, turn on the machine, turn the lights off. We're coming. You and I were laughing, and it seemed like a sitcom. You had a great sense of humor, many times playful like a child. So the four of us arrive at your door, and I knock, slowly opening the door, softly saying, Brahmananda, the doctors are here. We are coming in. We all go into the dark room, and I turn on the light and tell doctors to sit down. 3 pairs of brown eyes opened so wide and their mouths dropped open. There before them, lying down, was this enormous, massive mountain of a body. Huge stomach like a whale, with an oxygen mask on and gurgling sound. We had agreed on the phone to fix the tube so that it would make a sound that you would and you would rise up very slowly. When Brahmananda slowly rose up like a gigantic tidal wave, they all leaned back, gasping. It was such a comical sight. I had to swallow my laughter as you played your part expertly. They asked a few questions, which we replied, and spoke briefly with Mr. Bruce Charf. On the spot, they signed the required medical visa papers. You told them, I want to live out my last days in Vrindavan. Thank you very much for making this happen. Hare Krishna. The senior officer patted his back softly and said, that's all right. We can see you cannot travel. Radharani must favor you. I described to them the great service they were doing for a great devotee and gave them each a small book. They seemed happy to do this service. Krishna perfectly arranging, of course, for Prabhupada's dear son. Thank you, Brahmananda Prabhu, for your friendship, association, and for sharing Prabhupada with us in so many ways. Thank you, Srila Prabhupada, for giving us your divine grace, and Sri Gaur Bhaktavrinda, all glories to Sriman Brahmananda Prabhu, your servant Mahadevi Dasi. Hare Krishna. So I'd like permission from the Vaishnavas, if we can, there's still people who want to speak, so can we continue? Take breakfast a little late. So next I'd like to ask Anada Devi Dasi if she'd like to come and make her offering to Brahmananda Prabhu.
Thank you, all my wonderful God brothers and God sisters, for pouring the immortal nectar of devotional service. It's significant, and it was mentioned a few times, that Brahmananda Prabhu and his brother literally gave up everything materially desirable for the parenthood of Srila Prabhupada and the eternal service and protection that Srila Prabhupada has offered to all of us, in contrast to the miseries of the miseries that the illusory energy can afford us. So there's a couple of points of sweetness that I remember. One is that soon after Srila Prabhupada left, Brahmananda Prabhu was at Bhaktivedanta Manor, and we had been worshipping a small brass deity of Srila Prabhupada that we had gotten soon after Srila Prabhupada's departure. But then Gangamai Prabhu had received another deity of Srila Prabhupada that Lochan Prabhu had made. Lochan is the devotee that has made all of the deities of Prabhupada that are worshipped all over the world. So at that time we had two deities of Srila Prabhupada, and Brahmananda Prabhu asked if he could have our brass Prabhupada deity. And I remember we were doing business at that time. We were running the temple shop, and business was in our mind. So we said, and he said, "I'll give you a donation." So we said, "Okay, well, 50 pounds." So Prabhupada transferred from our care to the wonderful care of Brahmananda Prabhu. Prabhupada's amazing son. The first quality of a devotee, it's said, Prabhupada says, is that he's a gentleman. And Brahmananda Prabhu was certainly the most perfect gentleman. He had the stature with which he could bully everyone and anyone, but he certainly didn't misuse any of his energy, because it was all focused towards serving Srila Prabhupada. And as we've heard from Daiva Shakti Prabhu and Mahadevi Prabhu, the glorious, fearless nature that Brahmananda Prabhu exhibited, being willing to go anywhere and everywhere, and literally taking the highest risk. It's no joke to go off to Africa or to Pakistan alone. A Westerner preaching Eastern philosophy. This is definitely transcendental energy being transferred from our holy lords through the holy disciplic succession, through our holy devotees, to save all living entities, to bring us all back home, back to Godhead. So as Panchagoda Prabhu mentioned, we all need to be totally grateful that we've come under Srila Prabhupada's impermeable, infallible protection. We shouldn't step out of it. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, actually. You should be preaching to me. But it's very we have an indestructible tradition, this Guru Parampara. And anyone that surrenders sincerely to the Guru Parampara is also indestructible. They will continue serving Srila Prabhupada life after life, in whatever location. And yes, Brahmananda Prabhu had so many incredible qualities rolled into one, and we all pray for the day when we'll all get a little time to spend with Srila Prabhupada and his wonderful, wonderful, wonderful disciples in joyful Krishna consciousness together. Times are a little challenging at the moment, but there will be times when Prabhupada will gather us all and we'll all be there together again. We have all of that to look forward to, thanks to the wonderful devotees of the Lord. So thank you very much. All glories to Brahmananda Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. I was here in 1976, and then my visa was running out, and then Brahmananda, he found it out, and then he asked if I can go to Africa to help him. So I said, okay. So then he told me to go to London, and from London you go to Africa. So I went like that. And then I was there for about 8-9 months. So then also I was there when Prabhupada led the planet in 1977. And Brahmananda was there also. And every day we was very lucky because Brahmananda was talking so many stories about Srila Prabhupada. So he encouraged me to do book distribution. So I was going every day to do BTGs. And then the marathon was coming, 1977. So I was trying to be one of the tops there. And he was writing letters to me, say, Hunkara, keep distribute books because we got so many donations, because the people see these scores. So I was there in the first week, in the third, in the second week I was second, but I was one devotee always beating me. And there was 1977 BTGs. And I tried to, I say, who is this devotee? And here is Panchako. Panchako, I was trying to get him always, but he always in the top, to the end of the marathon. So then I was there, and then Brahmananda, then he sent me to London again, and then he sent me to West Africa. And then I was preaching there, and then he organized other preachings in African safari. And we left London, 8 devotees, and we reached Tunisia. Then we went to Tunisia, and then Brahmananda, he said, let's go and do Harinam. So then we went in Harinam, 8 devotees, shaving head with dhotis. After 2 or 3 minutes, there was about 5,000 people around us, people they never saw the devotees in Tunisia. Then after 10 minutes, the police came, and they arrested us and put in jail. And the next day, they sent us back to Europe. But Brahmananda, he was very determined, and we was going West Europe, East Europe, Italy, France, and then Spain. And then we got to Ceuta. It's a city in Africa that belongs to Spain. And then we tried to go through Morocco. But then also it was impossible to go, because they find the books, and the Muslim countries, then they don't want any other religion. So then we back to England. But Brahmananda is always very much determined to go to Africa. But at the end was all impossible. You know. So yeah, Brahmananda was very determined in his preaching. He always encouraged me to do the book distribution and yeah. So yeah, I have quite association with him, with Brahmananda, when he was in Africa and when I was in West Africa also. Yeah. Okay, see, that's all I had to say. Brahmananda Prabhu ki jai.